I'll go into that here in just a minute. But let's talk about social media, starting off here. I'm not going to knock over the lectern here. And you can find a lot of more information, a couple of different documents and different things at my website, chadl.co/ADP. That stands for Active Digital Parenting. And really would appreciate if you went there, downloaded some of that stuff. And it's been there a while, so it probably needs to be updated, but that's okay. Things to remember when we're talking about social media. We're talking about kind of anything with the internet, anything where something is going to be public. Because as I talked about in the last session, there's no such thing as privacy. Everything is public on the internet. No matter if they say it's private or not, everything is public. A thing to remember, a couple of different things to remember is that you are the product and not the customer. Now we think about that and we think about, Facebook. Oh, I'm Facebook's customer because I signed up for an account and I go on and I do all this and you are Facebook's product, not its customer. And that's hard for us to grasp because we don't want to admit that we're the ones that are being used. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these other places, yes, it's ways to share and communicate. I have connected with so many people from high school and all these other different people, and I know that you have as well through Facebook, but at the same time, every time you click, every time you like something, every time you share or post or retweet or whatever, you are the product, and you are giving them money. These services, these places like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those, they bill themselves as services to you, the product, the customer, but actually you're the product. And you think about how these companies make their billions. They make them off your clicks, your tweets, your posts, your likes, all those other different things. If you've ever been on the internet and you've seen the sidebar right there of Facebook advertisements or whatever of something that you just looked at on Amazon, right? I hate this time of year because whenever I shop on Amazon for my wife's stuff, right? I shop and I buy her like purses, and she's into this thing with boot socks now. I don't know if there's a thing with like wearing these pirate boots and boot socks right now. And I want to just get her a dagger to just put in the bottom of these pirate boots because that's what they look like, right? And so I'm shopping for these pirate boots, and now all I see on my Facebook feed is pirate boots, right? And boot socks and purses and things like that. And that just goes to show that Facebook's, what they call social graph, stretches way far and beyond. They are using your data, not necessarily against you, but just know they're using your data. Everything that you look at, every click, every post, every tweet, everything that they're looking at. I talked last session about how nothing is private. Nothing is private. We need to understand, and we need to make our kids understand that nothing is private. We need to make our kids understand that putting your social security number in a Facebook status for everybody to see is not a good idea. Not a good idea. We need to understand that giving your home address out to somebody that you don't know over the internet is not a good idea, right? We need to make our kids understand those different things, and we need to make sure that they know that nothing is private. Don't expect anything to be private. Anything that is transmitted, any kind of data that is transmitted can be intercepted. Just remember that. If a person has the right tools and the right knowledge, they can intercept that data. So nothing is private. Another thing you need to realize is you need to know your child's account username and password for any and all accounts. I had forgotten to do it, but I wanted to bring you guys something a lady did at Christmas last year. There was an ABC News story on what this lady did. She actually gave her son a new iPhone for Christmas, but in the package with the iPhone, she had a parent-child device contract. And it was 18 things about, very practical things, about how what you're going to be able to do with this device, what you're not going to be able to do with this device, and even the last one was very practical. It said something like, you are going to get in trouble with this, and I'm going to take your phone, and then we're going to talk about it. And it was very, very clear cut. Maybe something like that would work for your child. Maybe having some rules put on the refrigerator at home. Maybe just out there in the open for everybody to see and for that child to know, hey, there are rules to this. I don't just get to do whatever I want. Maybe that would work for your child. Now, you're thinking about some of your children right now going, oh, that's not going to work for my child. But maybe it will work. The rule that this lady actually had was to limit your child to 5 social media accounts at any one time. That does 2 things. One, it keeps them from just creating accounts arbitrarily and just doing whatever they want to do. And two, it helps you manage it a lot better. And when she says 5 social media accounts, well, say they want to add a 6th one in there, well, you make them take one away. You make them deactivate one of those accounts. That's kind of hard, and you may think that that's kind of harsh, and you may think that that's kind of unrealistic, but let me tell you, it has worked for a lot of parents. If you put limits, if you put a fence around your children for anything, they will know that those bounds are not to be crossed. They will know that those things that they will know that if they do that, if I do this, if I do that, if I cross these bounds, then I'm going to be in trouble. They need to know those different things. You need to know your child's username and password for all accounts. You need to have unlimited access to all of this stuff, those accounts. You need to make sure that you can log on to those accounts at any one time. You need to make sure that your kids know that you're logging on to them at any one time. I said in the last session that kids that know they're being watched are far less likely to seek out trouble. That's true. So if they know you're watching, that will go a long way to maybe helping them avoid a disaster. Maybe. Your child, and this is pretty funny, your child will naturally gravitate towards what is popular with their friends and what you're not using. How many of you, by show of hands, how many of you have a child? How many? Let me start this way. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay, every single one of you. Okay, largest demographic for Facebook today is ages 35 to 45. Okay, that's the largest demographic on Facebook. Now, you say that when parents started getting on Facebook, what did kids start to do? They started to get out of Facebook, right? Let me tell you, that's a lie. People are trying to tell, oh, well, kids aren't using Facebook anymore. Yes, they are. The data shows that kids are using Facebook. They're just not getting on there and posting and interacting with people. But they're looking. They've got the app on their phone, and they check it, and they look. They may use Messenger to private message people back and forth. You need to be looking at their private messages as well. And you need to let them know that you're looking at their private messages. But the data does not support this mass exodus of kids leaving Facebook. They haven't left. They're just not interacting. So, you think about what you were doing, where you wanted to hang out as a kid, right? When I was a kid, we had a coffee shop in Huntsville, Alabama that we liked to hang out at. Just a teenager place, man. 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Wasn't a person over the age of 21 in that whole place. If my parents would have walked in, it would have been like roaches scurrying out from the light, right? It would have been, they couldn't have gotten to their cars fast enough. But you think about when you wanted to hang out when you were a teenager, you didn't want to hang out with your parents either. And the kids are kind of doing the same thing. That's why Twitter has grown in popularity so much, is because you don't understand Twitter. Or you may think that you don't understand. It's actually quite easy. We're going to be talking about that here in a second. Know your child's username and password. Your child will naturally gravitate towards what is popular, what their friends are using, and what you're not using. Okay? So let's talk about starting off with Twitter. How many of you have a Twitter account? Okay? So the Facebook numbers were everybody. Twitter was like barely 10% of the people in this auditorium right now. Okay? Why? Is somebody tell me why that is? I just want to know. Just give me an answer. You just don't want to use it. That is the best answer I think I've ever heard, because that's my answer all the time. I don't want to use it. I don't care about all that. Snapchat, I could care less what it is, but guess what? Every single kid that has a smartphone is probably using it. I just don't want to use it. Do you know what it is? Do you know? Okay. Well, give me I'm not making fun of you or anything, but what do you think, in your own words, what is Twitter? Well, I can do that on Facebook. So what's the difference between Facebook and Twitter? I can post my thoughts on Facebook. You see what I'm saying here, devil's advocate? Facebook and Twitter are very, very different. In fact, if you were to boil them down, Twitter is Facebook status updates. That's it. There's no profiles, there's no picture albums, there's no games, there's none of this you can play. It's just little bitty status updates. Does anybody understand what hashtags are? See, I have so many people say, well, I don't know what these hashtags are, man. Let me tell you very simply, hashtags are just a way of categorizing tweets. If I was watching the Heisman Trophy presentation last night, I could have hashtagged Heisman. And every person that typed in Heisman to search the tweets, my tweet would have been in there somewhere. It's only just a way to categorize. You know what is really funny about that is that Twitter's users actually came up with that. Twitter didn't come up with that. They started to hashtag and stuff and do these different things to categorize tweets. Now, some of them don't make any sense because some people just make up their own. Yes, sir. Well, you see these, yeah, you see these groups that say the official hashtag for this is, right, and they'll put it out there. Well, if ESPN had it on their screen last night, I don't know that they did, but if they had hashtag Heisman real small there in the corner, then people would have been using that, and they would have been. Now, you're right. If somebody gets one letter wrong, then that's probably not going to show up, and that's why they're kind of so confusing. Is because people can just kind of make up their own and use their own. Yeah, it's unlimited categories. So, Twitter is an enigma to a lot of parents. That is why kids have flocked to it, because their parents just don't understand. And they know that, and they love that. They don't want you to understand. So what you need to do, as much as you don't want to, you need to go home and create a Twitter account. And you need to get on there and you need to follow certain people. You need to find your child and follow them. And I'm not saying do it dishonestly. I'm just saying get on there. Let them know you're getting on there. Yes, sir. Is 140, they're real close to lifting that, though. They've already lifted the requirement of character limits on direct messages. And see, direct messages on Twitter is where a lot of kids get into trouble. They get on there and they direct message each other. All of these services have these direct messaging features now. And Instagram even has where you can post a picture that only certain people can see. You can tag 4 or 5 people in it, and only those 4 or 5 people can see it. Private picture messaging. But yeah, they're looking at Twitter is limited to 140 characters, just like original text messages were back in the day. And they felt that that was a good limit, and they're actually really close to lifting that limit, and so people can just write novels on there, I guess, or whatever. But what questions do you have about Twitter? I can explain it all day long, but what questions do you have? Are your kids using this? Do you know how many of your kids using it? Anybody? No? So? Maybe? Possibly? Okay. What are your kids using? Snapchat. Right? Snapchat is what is considered a closed social network. You can only have what friends that you deem are on your list, right? And it's considered a smaller, closed social network. One thing about Snapchat, and I don't have it on the screen, but one thing about Snapchat you need to educate your kids on is that if they have it, which if they do, you need to take a literally close and serious look at it, because they can get in trouble really fast with that because they delete those pictures, right? But the thing that they need to understand on Snapchat is that don't, just like anything else, don't let somebody friend you that you don't know who they are. Don't let a stranger come in, oh, friend request, boom, like that, good, great, we're great. I got so many friends. I got 627 friends. How many of those people do you know? You know? So just make sure that they actually know the person on their Snapchat. And that goes for Twitter, Facebook, all these other different things as well. One thing you can do on Twitter, one thing you can do on several of the different things, especially Instagram, is you can make what is called a protected account. And that means that if I try to go and follow your child on Instagram, then I can't follow them because I have to request to follow them first. And so if your child has a protected account, that means that not just, Joe Blow from out here or the spam bot or something, computer-generated spam bot can just come and follow you. That means that they have a protected account. Yeah, you can even do it on the app, actually. You can go on the app and protect this account. You can go on the Instagram app, on the Twitter app, and you can actually... I think you may have to go on twitter.com and log in to protect your account. Yeah, Instagram, you can... And anytime you ever went to a user's profile and it says this user is private and has a little lock-in, they have a protected account. Instagram doesn't have necessarily a web interface, so it's on the app. So search for it in settings. And the thing that I can tell you about, you know, we're going to get into this in iOS settings here, and I'm running out of time very quickly, but go through the settings, go into your settings icon, go into your settings parts of these apps that your kids are using, and just see what you can do. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do. Facebook, good night. Facebook has, I think they change their settings and their privacy settings like every 6 minutes. They are relentless in doing all sorts. They have so many different things that you can do with privacy settings on Facebook. But you can go to Instagram on the app. You can go to, you can do the same thing on Vine. You can do the same thing on your iOS device in general. If you go to general settings and then general and go through all that different stuff, we're going to go through that here in just a minute. But if you just dive into some of these settings and some of these apps, you'd be surprised at what you can do. So that's what I would encourage you to go home and take your kid's device and make sure that their settings are enabled for those protected accounts. Okay, I got some on here. We talked about Facebook. Let's talk about Instagram. How many kids are on Instagram? Instagram is the fastest growing social network on the planet right now. I have no idea why, but they've went from 100 million to 400 million users in the last 18 months. Facebook actually bought Instagram for something like $2 billion, like 2 years ago. And they haven't really done anything to interfere with it, but now that Facebook owns Instagram, you can seamlessly put your pictures from Instagram onto Facebook and Twitter, whereas before you really couldn't necessarily do that. Instagram is pretty good about policing their own. Twitter is, and as I compare these social networks, you just kind of have to stick with me, but Twitter I would kind of say is the ungoverned wasteland of the internet. It really is. Because there's so many different, there's porn accounts on there that if you type in the right username, you can find a porn account. You can find all sorts of different things that are sharing, and it's just right there on your Twitter feed. So Twitter is largely ungoverned. You can try to report them. You can try to do all these other different things. And there's so many hundreds of millions of users on Twitter that they just can't keep track of them. But Facebook, on the other hand, is actually a lot more positive in that respect, because you can actually. Sometimes you can find some pretty bad stuff and people sharing some pretty bad videos and different things like that, but you won't find any pornography, you won't find any necessarily big violence on there, you won't find anything like that. Facebook is actually governed very, very well. But then you get to something like Instagram where it's like, okay, well, photos. How do you govern photos? And how do you govern 400 million people sharing photos, right? They're actually very good about doing these things. They've actually gotten a lot of trouble with some different aspects of some people trying to claim their photos as art and putting them on Instagram. And they will not allow nudity. They will not allow any of these types of things. So Instagram is actually pretty decently safe and pretty well governed. But still, when you look at the private aspect of these different things, when you look at the private aspect of direct messaging through Instagram, that's something that's not covered by any of their public policies. So you need to go in there and look and see what private messages that they have exchanged with people. You need to keep tabs on that. A lot of these services are introducing private ways of, and when I say private, I say it very, very loosely, private ways of messaging back and forth. Okay? Who's familiar with Vine? Anybody familiar with Vine? Okay. Kids on Vine do anything on Vine, or they just watch different things? Okay. Vine is 6-second little videos that people can make, and they have become pretty creative with what they can do with 6 seconds. You'd be amazed. But a lot like Instagram and Facebook, it's pretty well governed as well. They don't allow you to have any kind of pornography. That being said, there's plenty of stuff that's pretty raunchy on there as well. A big thing with all these social networks that you have to look at is who they're following. Who are they following? What accounts are they following? What are those accounts saying? What are those accounts tweeting links to? What are those accounts sending videos and pictures of? That's the things that you need. The first thing that you need to do with Twitter and maybe Vine and Instagram is go to see who they're following, right? Not necessarily who's following them, but to see who they're following. Because it may be several hundred people, 100 accounts that they're following. And that'll give you a clue as to what they're looking at every single day, because whoever they're following, when they're swiping up through their feed, it's going to show them every post from every person that they're following. Okay? Any questions about Vine or any of these things before we move on? I want to take your questions or anything if you have any. Snapchat is one that we talked about. Take a really good look at that and really look at that and say, kind of do an audit, and we're going to talk about doing an audit here of your child's social media accounts and different things like that, but really take a look at it. And it's billed as this app is billed as private, but it's anything but. And that's the thing that you need to be wary of, is if they try to say it's all private and try to say it's, nobody's going to get caught for anything, then you need to look at that. Yes, ma'am. On the iOS App Store, there is an app. I don't have it right here. It's I can't remember. It's got a weird name, and it's just right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember it. And I'll get this app name to you in just a minute. But it is an app that you can set up with your phone and with your child's device, and you can actually monitor different things of what they're doing. You can set time limits on what they're doing. You can set time limits on certain apps. You can see what apps they've downloaded. How many of you are on, let's talk about this a little bit and how you've structured this. How many of you have the same Apple account with your children? Or do your kids have different Apple accounts? They have a different account? You have the same account? Okay. If you have the same account, well, and it's very complex as how you can set these things up, because you can set them up as all different accounts, which would be good because they're eventually going to, go off and go to college and different things like that. And they probably should have their own account, but still, you need to have the Apple ID password and username for that. And you need to be able to log on there and see what they have bought. You need to set up, I'm going to go into this here in a minute, but you need to go in and you need to set up family sharing. There's something called family sharing. You can actually see what they've downloaded. You can actually approve or disapprove purchases that they want to make on your combined accounts. So it's almost like having the best of both worlds. You don't have to have the same account, because you can link those accounts together and you can see what each one of have. For instance, my wife and I have the same, we have two different accounts, but we have them set up through family sharing. And so I can see all of what music she's downloaded, what apps she's downloaded, and we can share those things. She can download apps that I have bought and vice versa. And so if you set that up with your children, that's why it's called family sharing, because you can actually see what they've bought, you can see what they've done, and everything like that. We're going to go into some settings here in a minute where I can show you that you can, if you don't want your kid downloading apps at all, you can shut that off completely. If you don't want them installing any apps, you don't want them deleting any apps. If you want to be able to, for lack of a better term, if you want to catch them red-handed, downloading the wrong apps or downloading some things that you told them not to, then you can actually prevent them from deleting those apps as well. We're going to go through that here in just a second. Did I answer your question somewhat? I got to get that name of that. It's a funky name, and I've got it written down somewhere. But it is actually a really great app for doing that. It does have a price per month. I think it's $6 or $7 per month. But I mean, that's nothing. That's Netflix prices per month to look at what your child. Now, on the Android side, I will tell you, Android has some phenomenal, great parental control apps, because where Apple has wanted to control the parental controls on the device at the front end, Google opts to do the opposite and lets you control all that on the back end with third-party apps. And neither approach is wrong. It's just that one decides to do it another way than the other does. So there's all these apps on Google phones and Android phones that you can download, parental control apps that will link into certain things, and they will dive really deep, whereas you can't do that on iOS. You can only do kind of surface stuff on iOS with third-party apps. But that being said, on the front end, Apple has pretty great parental controls right there on the device that you don't even have to download anything for. Okay? Let's go and any questions on social media? There's that after-school app that I told you about. It's the weirdest looking app icon. I don't know why it's a tiger with the Kanye glasses on, but so there's the after-school app. Look for that icon on your thing. If you look on your child's phone and you don't know what something is, You need to start asking questions. You need to start quizzing them. You need to start diving into the, so hey, what is this? What are you using this for? What YouTube videos have you been watching? What music are you downloading and listening to? The big thing right now with streaming music services like Spotify is that they can listen to all this kind of music and they can do it all for free or next to nothing. You need to know what they're all listening to, because there's these millions and millions of songs out there, and probably a lot of them they don't need to be listening to. So that's another thing that you need to check up on. Basically, let me just put it this way, check up on everything. That's basically what I'm saying, is get your kid's device and audit and check in everything, okay? There's that after-school app. But let's talk about iOS parental controls and safety for a second. And I'm going to go through this with you, and it's actually very simple. Sometimes if we have the capability to do it, I'll actually show you what's on my phone to go through these devices, but maybe we can do it here together today. If you want to go ahead and get out your phones, if you want to look at them, phones, iPads, and these are going to be the same for phones and iPads. Androids, it's not going to work for Androids necessarily, but I can talk to you a little bit later about that if you'd like. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'll just go over this with you really fast. But it's actually, if you just dive into these settings, you can actually look at these. So if I go to my settings icon and go into all this other stuff, and you'll see the stuff you normally see at the top that you are normally ticking off and doing different things. Airplane mode, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, all these other different things. Notifications. Just a little side note about notifications. If you go into that tab, this has nothing to do with necessarily your kids or anything, you can actually turn off notifications for just about anything you want. If your phone's constantly buzzing and beeping and doing all this other stuff, you can turn all that off. I've told so many parents, they've said, well, I didn't know I could turn that stuff off. Well, yeah, you can turn anything you want off. iOS has actually made that pretty simple and look at to use. You can actually set Do Not Disturb. You can actually set that for a scheduled time, and you can actually set it for if somebody calls you repeatedly, then it will actually ring your phone. But if somebody calls me between 10 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, then my phone doesn't ring. If I get an email at 2 a.m. from a telemarketer or something, my phone doesn't go beep like that and wake me up. So I can Do Not Disturb on, and that's a really, really nice feature. Okay, so let's get back into parental controls here. If you go into the General tab, and it should see things like About, Software Updates, Siri, Spotlight Search, Handoff, Accessibility, CarPlay, Storage, iCloud Storage, Auto Lock, Restrictions. About halfway, 3/4 of the way down the page, you should see Restrictions. Apple doesn't really make it all that obvious, but you can go to Restrictions and look at that. Now, if you hit that Enable Restrictions button, you're going to have a restrictions passcode. Okay? Now, it's very important that you know this passcode and that you know it and write it out, because if you don't remember this, and it can be the same one that unlocks your phone, but if you're doing this for your child's phone, then you probably don't want to do that. So it needs to be a PIN number that your child does not know. So if you hit that Enable Restrictions, I can set a passcode here, and then you have to retype it in, and that allows you to go in and look at all these different things. And by the way, this PowerPoint presentation will be on my website, and you can go find all these different settings and different things like that. So you can go to fingerprint passcode, Touch ID, and look at all the different things for the fingerprint passcode. There's a couple of cool things that you can do if you have a fingerprint reader on your phone. And anybody who has a 5S, iPhone 5S and above, and even some of the newer Android phones have a fingerprint reader on them. Well, I can't speak necessarily for Android, or especially some of the Samsung phones, but iOS actually allows you to put up to 5 different fingerprints on that phone. So what you can do is have your fingerprint, have your child's fingerprint on there, obviously, and then have yours and your spouse's fingerprints on there as well. So even if they have a passcode locked on and everything like that, you can enable it to where they can't change the fingerprints around. So you can get on that phone by just your fingerprint at all. And that's actually a really, really nice feature where you don't have to remember all these passcodes and whatnot. So if you're in the Restrictions tab, we're still in the Restrictions tab here, and you see all these things. You see Safari, Camera, Siri and Dictation, FaceTime, AirDrop, CarPlay, all these different things. If you don't want your child to be able to access, to go online and look at websites, you can click that Safari tab off. The app will be removed from the home screen. They won't even be able to pull up Safari. If they're on say, a video game app or a Twitter app that tries to pull up a web page, it will block that. It will say, sorry, Safari is not authorized on this device. So if you don't want them to be able to look at the internet at all, take that off. There's a couple different things. A lot of people have come to me and said, I've got a big problem with my kids. They've been doing some pretty bad stuff with the camera and taking pictures and sending them to people that they shouldn't be sending them to, all these other things. But I still need them to have the device. I still need them to be in touch with them to have the device. We'll go on and uncheck that camera tab, and the camera will disappear. You will have no access to the camera whatsoever. And that's a really good thing for people that have had trouble with that. And then you can go right back down through here. A lot of kids have found that FaceTime is pretty private because you can do different things as far as contact them through their email or through their phone number, and it's video chatting. And if you don't want your kids to be able to do that with other kids, uncheck that. And then there's a whole host of other ones right down here. If you don't want them to be able to buy stuff on the iTunes store, you can uncheck that. Right down here it says installing and deleting apps and in-app purchases. The in-app purchases one is very, very important. I had a parent come to me, if you especially have a small child that's using an iPad or something that's on your account with your credit card attached to that account, a lot of these games will try to get the kids to buy certain things, jewels or coins or something like that, to go on and buy stuff to go on in the game, right? They engineer these games now to where it makes it incredibly easy for you to buy those things and keep going in the game, right? So they'll have these little pop-up things and these in-app purchases, and it's just so easy for a kid to just go, buy, and it says confirm purchase, buy, confirm purchase, buy, and that's all it does. I had a parent come to me with a $400 bill from Apple because their kid in one afternoon, buy. And you've probably had that discussion with your kids. Hey, why is there a $10 charge on my credit card? What did you buy? You've probably had that discussion. Well, if you turn off in-app purchases or installing or deleting apps or any of that iTunes store stuff, you won't have that problem. Now, that will completely lock them out. But at the same time, that needs to be a discussion that you have. Now, for the allowed content down there, if you go down to allowed content, still under this restrictions tab, it's got all these ratings, right? All these ratings: music, podcasts, news, movies, TV shows, books, apps, Siri, website. This is all great, fine, and good, but this is not universal. Because you would think that this would be for anything with any app on the device. But these are actually only for iTunes purchased stuff. Apple Music, iTunes movies, iTunes TV shows. If you have bought into that ecosystem and you buy stuff on the store and you view things, then this would be for you. But for most people, what they have to worry about is Netflix, and they have to worry about YouTube, and they have to worry about their kids seeing things on all these other different things like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. That's where you're going to need to go into those apps individually and set parental controls. Some places don't make it very easy because they make you can actually go to YouTube and you have to enable on the account on your desktop, you have to enable parental control mode, and you can go into that and look that up. It's at the bottom of every YouTube page that you're signed into your Google account on. All sorts of different things, and it's just a mountain of settings that you can dive into. But you have to go into most of the time you're going to have to go into these individual apps and look at their individual settings. So if you have an app, if your kid is real big in YouTube and likes to watch stuff on YouTube, if they're real big on Twitter and they like to surf Twitter and do these different things on Twitter, dive into those settings on those apps. Find the parental controls or find the lockdown or protected account controls and lock those. In addition to these settings, you can lock them down even further through those individual apps. Going further down here in the restrictions tab to privacy, there's a lot of different things about sharing your location and location services. One big thing, and this is kind of a loophole for you as parents, but one big thing about the anonymous apps, most of them require location. And they require you to be able to pinpoint your location because you're going to be in a certain area, like a school campus or a football field or whatever like that, to be able to communicate with people in that network. So if the phone cannot access the location, then that app is worthless. It can't do anything. So that's maybe a little bit of a loophole. You really need to just delete the apps and to get rid of these anonymous apps. Any app that lets your child do anonymous things, you need to get rid of that and just say no to it. But even if they were to download this, you can disable the location. Now, if you disable the location on it, that disables a few other things like GPS. If they rely on their GPS or their Maps app to get places and to do different things, you'll have to figure that out yourself, figure out the balance between that. But if you go into location services, you can go into all, and you can see what apps have requested. You can actually go down the list and see what apps have requested to use your location. I have no idea why some of these apps would request to use my location, but they do. And you can do that with a lot of other different things that request this information. You can see a list of every single app that has requested your contacts, your calendars, reminders, photos, microphone, Twitter, Facebook, advertising, all these other different things. You can see that right here on your device under the restrictions tab. And then this big one right here at the bottom, and this is kind of one of the last ones we're going to hit. But this real big one right here at the bottom, allow changes. And then it has 4 little things: accounts, cellular data use, background app refresh, and volume limit. That right there on accounts, if you got it on your child's account, you want to go in and hit don't allow changes, because that will not allow them to change anything. Because you've set up a wall with this restrictions passcode now that unless they know that restrictions passcode, they can't go in and change these different things, which means they can't make account changes, which means they can't circumvent your own security stuff that you've set up. So it's very, very informative. Down here is cellular data use. I would also hit that with don't allow changes. In fact, if this is your child's device, I would probably do don't allow changes from anything. And I want to tell you real briefly about this. I say contact the carrier, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, whatever you have. Contact the carrier, and they will actually be able to help you a lot with these different things. If you are the authorized user on the account, then they will be able to help you block a number from calling. If you've had issues with a caller calling and harassing your child or harassing you or anything like that, you can block that number. You can block a number from texting. You can shut off texting. You can shut off or limit your data. I shut off my data when I went to Mexico because I didn't want to be charged 40 cents a megabyte for Mexican data through Telmex or whatever it is. You can deactivate the personal hotspot. A lot of kids now will have the personal hotspot on their phones, especially through Verizon, because Verizon makes it very easy, and they'll just let their friends use all their Wi-Fi. And then suddenly you look at your family's data plan and it's all used up because your kid let 5 of his friends use the Wi-Fi at the same time. So you can actually lock this device down in a lot of different areas. I do want to ask if there's any questions. I know I really rushed through that at about 100 miles an hour, and I do apologize, but we're on a time crunch. So anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. That's difficult on iOS. It's very difficult because, one, iMessage is encrypted. And even Apple cannot tell you what people are sending text messages back and forth. Your best bet on text messages is to simply know the passcode to the phone and check to make sure that they don't delete it. There's not a setting to prevent them from deleting text messages. I wish there was. And if there was, you could just hit that and then they wouldn't be able to delete anything and you could constantly check up on them. But the problem is it's so easy to just delete those message threads as they can do anything that they want. There's really not a good solution to monitor text messages on iPhones. Now, Android, there's any number of things that you can download to monitor text messages on those. There's a lot of different things you can actually download. But Apple just does not allow you to dive that deep into messages. So, sorry about that, but there's really not any kind of way to monitor that. Now, there is kind of some loopholes that you can do, I guess. If you've ever noticed that iMessage can work on your Mac, it can also work on an iPad, and you can also text from your iPad. You can text from phone numbers from your iPad and from your different things. Well, if you sign into your child's account on any of those devices and you enable iMessage, then you will get all the messages that they get, and you'll see everything that they see. That's a kind of a crude way of monitoring, and it's not guaranteed to work all the time. But I know that when somebody texts me, this iPad goes off, this Mac goes off, and everything goes off. And so if you did that with your child's account, then you could actually monitor what they're talking to and who they're talking to. Yeah. And that would be a solution, but it's not a very good one. So sorry about that. Not a real great way. Any other questions before we end? Again, if you have any questions, my email is chad@graymere, GRAYMERE.com. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try, to answer them. And I do appreciate you being here. I do appreciate your attention, and thank you so much.
Great job.
Thanks, man.